Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we identified with the Jersey example and Spring Acute here. So the drawback we identified here, basically, whenever we are adding the Jersey information, like the Jersey starter here in the pom.xml, so we could not get the security related information here. Getting the point. So I comment out this particular Jersey related here, and I run the same example here. So what we implemented in the previous example here, so we are able to see the informations here. Like for example, if I'm going to run this particular application, okay, now you can see application is started here. Now if I'm trying to click on this particular application with help of localhost here, so now you can see, so which is asking username and password here. Username and password here. So we don't have the particular test page here. We don't have this particular test page here. Now if I'm trying to click here, now you can see the main page we are able to load here. So this is we are identified in the previous example here. So because of this particular Jersey, we could not find out the proper information here. Okay. So this is all about the previous example we identified here. And now, so we implemented Acute related information here. Now you can see these are the Acute beans here. These are the Acute beans we implemented here. Now you can see, so in our example, what are the beans we added here? So maybe reading list repository. So we need to identify where this particular reading list is available. So now you can see, so this is the dependency section we are getting here, because this is the package we are having here. The reading list class is located. Getting the point. And so this is the reading list, and it is having some dependency called password information and user repository here. So along with this, now you can see how this object is created here. So now here it is providing the information. The scope we are having singleton. The type of this particular object called com.springboot reading list repository. Getting the point. And so internally it is connected with the JPA repositories here, because we connected example. So JPA related example here. So this is all about this particular object creation called reading list. So now in the same time, now what we will do, we'll connect with our book resource. Now you can see book resource. So this is also same singleton, and the type of this particular object here, and where this particular file is located, which is providing the location of the file here, which is providing the particular location of the file. So this we need to understand the object creations here. So this is the way we can identify all the objects, how all the objects are created internally. Getting the point. Now in the same thing, you can work on the user repository. So you can see this is also one more object here. This is also one more object here. Getting the point. So this is providing the bean section here. This is providing the bean section information. Now you can see if I'm trying to click on this particular accurator up to this particular endpoint. So these are the information we are getting here. So what are the information we are getting here? Now you can see, so this is the identified bean section, and so present we don't have any cache related information. And now you can see, so this is providing the health section. This is providing the health section. Now if I'm trying to click on this particular health here, observe here, so the status is up and running here. So it's nothing but the application is running successfully. Now you can see this is the different path here, and so environment here. Now what is the environment we are having here? So it will provide the, what happened? So it is giving the environment information here. So these are the each classes where exactly it is available, and what are the dependencies of this particular all the jars here. What are the dependencies of all the jars? Now you can see, so it's trying to load application.properties here. So what are the application.properties here? So Spring data source driver class name. So what is the value we are having? Org Postgres driver. Getting the point. And this is all about the our URL, and so we can find out the username also. So this is the password, and now you can see the password is encrypted here. The particular password is encrypted. So this is the way the values will load from the our particular property file, and along with this we can identify all the jars related, all the jars. Now you can see all are coming from the .m2 repository. .m2 repository. So why the .m2 is coming here? Because so we are working with the Maven. All the jars are going to download it inside the .m2 folder. Getting the point. So this is all about the particular environment here. And later, now you can see, so loggers here. Now you can identify this particular logger here. So what is providing here? So this is providing the information regarding our current application logger. Current application logger here. So everything is providing here. So if I'm going to get any exception, so with the help of this particular logger endpoint, we can easily identify so what is an exception we are getting and why we are getting the particular exception. Getting the point. So this is the entire log message of this particular application. So now what you're understanding here, in the Springboard, we are having one very important feature called Accuter here. Getting the point. So this is providing so entire information regarding our application here. So this will work with whenever in the production environment, if I'm going to get any exception. So with the help of this particular endpoints, we can easily understand so where exactly the exception we are getting here. With the help of this particular logger, with the help of this particular environment, and with the help of this particular application health here, we can easily identify here. And now you can see we're having head dump here. So now you can see it is trying to download the dump folder here. So now what I will do here, I will try to download the dump folder. So it is a file. I'm trying to open with the notepad here. So we cannot identify. So what is having here? So basically it is not, we cannot understand what is the information we are having inside this particular dump folder. So but what we can understand here with the help of this particular heap dump here, so how much the memory is occupied, we can easily understand here because the extension they made as a file here. Getting the point. So because of this particular file, so we could not understand more about this particular heap dump. Okay, now so here it is providing thread dump here. So heap dump is different and thread dump is different here. So we need to understand the difference between these two here. This is basically the each thread information here. Now you can see the thread state is runnable because the thread is still running here. Getting the point. So this is, if you know the little bit about the multi-threading concept here, we can easily understand this particular thread name here. And here we are going to have model name and model version, method name, and so what is the name of the thread also we can easily identify here. So this is all about the particular thread information. So how we are going to identifying each and every information. So with the help of this particular Accuter here, with the help of this particular Accuter, the final one, now we can understand here metrics here. So this is all about the metric about the JVM related information here. Getting the point. So it's providing all the JVM related information in the endpoint call Accuter metrics here. And finally, now you can understand the scheduled tasks. Getting the point. Now you can understand the scheduled tasks, and we can go for the mapping here. So these are the endpoints we are having in our Acute here. So these are the mapping real-time information here. These are the mapping real-time information here, how the each and every mapping is associated here. Getting the point. So try to, whenever you are having the time, so try to find out the how each and every endpoint is working internally and how this particular data is providing. If you observe, all the information we are getting as a JSON format here. All the information we are getting as a JSON format here. So this we need to understand very carefully when we are trying to work with the Acute. So this is very important feature is implemented in the Spring Boot here. Okay. So any questions regarding this particular Acute framework here? Okay. So we don't have anything here. Now what we will do, we'll move on to the microservices concepts here. Basically, so we need to understand the microservice information, how these particular microservices are coming here, and what are the advantages we are going to get when we are trying to work with the microservices here. Getting the point. So basically, before this particular microservices introduction here, first we need to understand the monolithic application, monolithic applications or monolithic architecture style here. Getting the point. So what exactly we will do in the monolithic architecture style here? In the monolithic architecture, the application is delivered in the single deployable software artifact here. So it's nothing but the entire application we are going to deliver as a single WAR file or jar file here. Getting the point. So if I'm going to deliver this particular application as a single jar file, inside this particular application, we are going to have different module here. Getting the point. So here we are going to have different module, and this particular entire module will come as a single var file here. Single var file here. Getting the point. Now if you observe carefully, this is all about our application. In our application, we divided into the module, but all the modules, getting the point, all the modules are connected to the single database and single version control system. Getting the point. So this particular applications are connected to the single database and single version conversion here. If you see, so for example, so this entire application is going to work with Postgres here. Postgres SQL database, and for example, we connected with our S1 version control system. Getting the point. Now what we are doing here, all the modules, whatever the modules so far we implementing here, all the modules are connected to this particular SVN to check out the code and to check in the code here. Getting the point. And the same way, all the modules are connected to the same database here. Now what happens here? Basically, the problem here, so whenever if we get any exception here while like building our application here, now what happens here? First, we need to shut down this particular entire application here. Getting the point. So first, we need to shut down this particular entire application to find out the root cause here. To find out the root cause here, right? And once the root cause is identified here, now what we need to do? Again, we need to rebuild an application and we need to deploy this particular WAR file into the appropriate servers here. Right. Now what happened here, whenever we are having this particular, the big drawbacks here, all the developers are getting the point. So while building an application, we cannot perform any action here. And because of small changes here, the entire application is a problem here. Getting the point. So once the particular issue is resolved, the entire application is available to perform the actions here. So now so here for the testing also, this application is not available whenever we are having any issues here. And along with this here, while implementing the code here, one user is trying to commit the changes here. One user trying to commit the changes, what happens here? So again, if we get any exception here, so we cannot work with the other developers here. Because of this particular entire application is connected with a single var file and a single database and a single version control here. But when we're trying to work with microservices applications here, now what happens here? So we are going to divide it into the each module here. Getting the point? So we are going to divide it into the each module here. So now you can see how we can work with the microservice applications here. So in the microservice application, this is an one module. This particular module will connected with one database and one version control system here. And the same way, how many modules we are going to have in our entire application. So we are going to work with different databases and different. So version control is nothing but where we are going to check the code here. Getting the point? Now you can think here, if one module is having a problem, getting the point. So while testing an application or building an application, if one module is having a problem here, so the remaining two modules, without stopping the application, we can build an application, we can test an application. So because these each and every module, it is independent to the each and every other module here. So it's not going to depend on the other module here. Because here we are having different database and different version controls, so that whenever we are having a time here, we can build our application here. So this particular module is not going to depend on these two here. Getting the point? So this particular module we can develop whenever we are having a time. Same way, this also we can develop here. So while building our application or while testing our application, if you get any exceptions here, so this module will happily successfully is running. Same way, this particular module also will happily running the application. But here for this application, for this module, now what we can we can shut down this particular module and we can identify the root cause and we can fix the root cause and we can rebuild our application here. Only so this particular module will affect here, and the remaining module we can build our application, we can perform the operation. So it's nothing but with the help of this particular microservices here. So the each and every module is a loose couple here. So instead of making our entire application with a tight couple, with the help of this particular microservices, we are going to make loose coupling here. Getting the point? And so one more here. So instead of waiting the in the years of year, because in the earlier days, what happened here? So once the entire application is developed here, we'll try to release an application here. But here, what happens here? The client, it needs to waste some years here, like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, because to complete the entire application. But here nowadays, what happening here? Because of this particular microservices, we can deliver module by module here. So if this particular module is completed, we can deliver this particular module. And same way, if the another module is completed, we can deliver, because each and every module we are going to have. So each var file here, so that customer can also get an idea so once the each module is implemented, they can work on their business side. Getting the point? So this is also one of the another advantage we are going to get from the microservices here, right? And in the monolithic application here, the main drawbacks here, the size and complexity here. Getting the point? Because if I'm trying to write all the module in the single var file here, now what happened here? So definitely the size is going to increase here. And it is to maintain this particular application is very complexity here. Getting the point? And here, with help of this particular microservices, the microservices are small and it is loose coupled and it is distributed services, because each and every microservices, so it's over the network, or if you are developing based on the cloud environment here, we can integrate with each and every microservices here, right? So now we can easily develop the large application and we can decompose into the each manager component here. Getting the point? So this is all about the difference between monolithic application and microservices applications here. So this we need to understand very carefully here. Getting the point? So here now what happens internally? Here we are going to have Here we are going to have, so database. So each microservice we are going to have a different database, and here we can work with the repository section here. Either we can work on the Git or SVN. If they are having any own repository, we can commit the whatever the code we are implementing here, right? And how we are going to communicating each and every microservices. So with the help of the different media types, we are going to communicate. So this we'll see in our upcoming classes. Getting the point. So, but what we need to understand here, the difference between monolithic applications and the microservices applications here, right? So any questions regarding this particular microservices architecture and the difference between monolithic applications and microservices application here? Okay. Basically, so this particular microservices here, the logic, like whatever the logic, whatever the application we are going to develop here, so first we'll identify how many modules we are going to develop here. And based on this particular module here, now what we will do, we will divide it into the each microservices here. And each the like internally, if we are going to call as a component here, the each component we are going to have a small domains here, and is going to responsibility and deploy the complete independent to the one other here. Whenever we are dividing into the components here, the each component again will have a different kinds of model classes here. Model classes is nothing but the domain classes here. So based on the domain classes here, what we will do, we'll try to implement the code and we'll deploy into the appropriate repository. And here each microservices is independently to the another one here. So this is very important, we need to understand here. Okay. And once we identify this particular information, now what we can do? So basically, the simple example we understand here. So the entire microservices we are going to work with the entire microservices we are going to connect it with our Spring Boot here. So with the help of this particular Spring Boot, we are going to develop the all the microservices here. Okay. Now, what do you need to understand here? Basically, we already identified here with the help of this particular Spring Boot. So what we identified in the earlier days, so maybe I think I remove this particular application. So with the help of this particular Spring Boot here, we can work on the Postman related example here. How we can work on this particular Postman related example here? So whatever the API we implemented so far here, getting the point. So we'll create a simple API, and based on this particular simple API, we'll send in a request here. So it will try to provide the simple information here. In the earlier days, like when we are trying to work with the first example on the Spring Boot, we identify the message section of code here. Okay. Now we need to understand so why the changes in the build application here. Getting the point. So why we get these particular changes here? Basically, first we identify the complexity here. Getting the point. So complexity we identified here, and the customers also faster delivery. So instead of waiting years and years here, so they need a faster delivery here. With the help of this particular monolithic here, so we cannot release the entire application in a faster way here. We cannot release in a faster way. But how we can release with the help of this particular microservices, we can deliver the each and every microservices based on this some certain time here. Right. And here now performance and scalability. Getting the point. Because of this particular drawbacks of the like shutdowning the application while testing and while developing an application. So here we need to wait to rebuild and retest the application here. So this is very difficult to maintain all the applications here. Whenever we are divided into the microservices here, this particular microservice is not going to depend on the another microservices here. Getting the point. If we get any exception, happily the remaining microservices are going to run. So this is very important here. Performance and scalability we are going to achieve with the help of this particular microservices here. So now we need to understand the basic the advantages how we identified with the help of this particular microservices. And So, and here what we will do with the help of this particular microservices, we are going to work on the cloud here. So with the help of this particular cloud, we are going to work on the microservices example. So what exactly the cloud is going to work here. Now, if you understand here, the cloud, we are going to have different kinds of clouds here. Getting the point. So I want to define the what are the different types of clouds we are having here. And here, so infrastructure as a service. So getting the point. So this is one of the cloud we are having here. So we'll understand here how it will work here. So this we are going to call it as a infrastructure as a service, IaaS. And another one, so platform as a service here. Getting the point. So these are the two, and same way, software as a service here. Getting the point. Now, what you are understanding here, so these three are the different types of the cloud services we are going to have. The first one, IaaS, is nothing but infrastructure as a service here. And second one, platform as a service here. Second one, we are having platform as a service here. And the third one, we are having software as a service here. So we'll understand here the difference between these three here. Basically, now what you are understanding in the name, so itself it's providing the information here. So if we want to work with IaaS, the service here, so it will try to provide the basic structure here. With the help of this particular basic structure here, what we will do, so directly we'll try to work on the basic structures here. We'll try to work on the particular basic structure, and we can implement the application code here. Getting the point. So this is the way we can work here. So otherwise we can work with a platform as a service here, and software as a service. So simple example here, if I want to take a home any item here. So basically, if we want to take the eating related item, what we will do? So basically, we are having different kinds of options here. So we'll try to make it in our home. So otherwise, we'll go for the grocery store, and we'll buy up some of the items. Like what are the items we need to make some, like to prepare the particular item here. Getting the point. So otherwise, what we will do, we'll go for the online delivery option. So otherwise, we'll get a restaurant here. Getting the point. So these are the different types of option we are going to have. Same way in our cloud environments also, we are going to have different kinds of services here. So how we are going to use this particular service is important here. Getting the point. And in this particular services here, now what we need to understand here, in the infrastructure as a service, the information like infrastructure is provided by this particular IaaS service here. So just simply with the help of this particular infrastructure, we can work on our applications here. So otherwise, now what we can do? So with the help of this particular platform as a service here, they will provide the basic platform. With the help of this particular basic platform, we need to implement all the example here. And so the service, the software as a service here, so they will provide the entire services here. So just we need to use the entire service here. So these are the difference between infrastructure and platform and software. So we'll try to understand this particular the cloud services here. But now most of the time we'll work on this particular infrastructure. Based on the infrastructure, so we are going to integrate with our application here. Okay. Now back to here. So why we need to use this particular cloud and microservices here? Getting the point. So what exactly the advantages we are going to get when we are trying to work with the cloud and microservices here? Basically, we identify the advantages about the microservices, and we need to work on the cloud information. The one of the core concept of this particular microservices we identified here, and we can the services we can package and deploy into the independent artifact here. Independent artifact is nothing but, so instead of working with the entire one artifact here, we are going to divide it into the multiple artifacts. So we discuss here, each microservices is going to have each var file here. Correct the point. So this is all about the one advantage we are identified. And what about this particular cloud here? So basically, so instead of working with a physical server here, we are going to work with a virtual servers here. Getting the point. So in the earlier days, if we identify the applications we are going to, whatever the application we develop here, this application is going to run with help of this particular physical servers. With help of this particular physical servers. Now, so with help of this particular cloud here, we are going to work with virtual servers here. So that is, we are going to call it as a virtual machines here. Getting there. So that is, we are going to call it as a virtual machines here. And what are the drawbacks we are going to identify with help of this particular physical machine? And to maintain this particular physical machine, getting the point. So it is very this particular physical machines are constrained here. We cannot maintain this particular physical machines here. And inside this particular virtual machines here, so it will try to create a different kinds of virtual images here, because in our cloud environment, we are going to call it as the virtual machine images concepts here. And if this particular one virtual machine is down, immediately we can work with another virtual machine. So this kind of functionality we don't have in our physical server here. If the physical server is down, we need to identify why the server is down, and we need to resolve the particular issues here. But in the virtual machine, so automatically if the one virtual machine is down, we can work with another virtual machine. So same way, the load balancing also we can easily maintain with help of virtual machines here. Getting the point. So and here, so what we identified here, we are going to get more scalability compared to our physical servers here. So this is, so we are going to get with help of this particular cloud and so virtual container here. So this is also one more advantage we are going to get, container here. And here, if I want to deploy anything here with help of this particular containers, we are going to deploy the particular images concepts here. And what is the simple example here? The container, we can work with Docker here. So Docker is one of the container. So it will work with virtual machines, and it will deploy our service here. It will try to deploy our services. So this is all about the two advantage we are going to get from the cloud environment here. And here, so as I explained here, with help of this particular cloud providers here, so we can easily deploy our microservices, and it's going to give you the significant and response from the virtual machines here. Getting the point. Now, so here we need to understand as I explained here, we are going to work with this particular so infrastructure as a service here. So what it will provide here, this particular IaaS, it's provide you getting the point. It's providing the ability to control our service here. So how we want to control our service here, the infrastructure as a service, the cloud environment is providing the behavior here. So based on this particular service here, now what we can do, we can control our service. So what are the services running in our cloud environment here, and if we want to change anything here with help of this particular IaaS, we can change. Like with help of this, we can, if we want to stop and if we want to start this particular infrastructure as a service, we can work with simple API calls here. Getting the point. With help of the simple API calls, we can stop the cloud server, and we can start the cloud server here, right? And so this particular cloud servers it's going to start quickly, or it's going to stop so within the short time here. But if I want to start and stop here, the physical servers, so it's going to take little bit more time compared to our virtual servers here. Getting the point. Now, so we need to work on the microservices code here. Basically, what we will do, So here we need to understand the more about the microservices instead of writing the code here. So how we need to understand this particular microservices more about the writing the code. So if you see basically, so this is all about our microservices here. So this is all about our microservices here. Right. Now, what do you need to understand here? We implemented this particular microservices here, and so we need to focus more onto the remaining components here. So, for example, here we are having so size sizes. So, like whenever we are trying to implementing here, the right size here. Getting the point. So, how we can implement the right size here? And so location of this particular microservices here. Location of this particular microservices here. And now what we can understand here, location transparent here. Getting the point. Location transparent here. And here, so we need to understand the more about this particular scalability. Getting the point. So we need to understand this particular scalability here. And we need to work on the another one here, repeatable. Getting the point. So this we need to focus more onto while implementing this particular microservices here. So first we need to focus on the size of this particular microservices, and we need to focus on the location here, and we can identify the scalability, how your microservice is going to work on the scalable here, because it's nothing but so you need to work with dependencies here, because each microservice is going to have the multiple dependencies here, and based on the multiple dependencies, how this particular microservice is providing the scalable response we need to understand, and repeatable here, and every time. So here the service instance is started carrying the point. So because of this particular repeatable, what happens internally, how we can understand here for every time the service is the new services instance is going to start it, and the code and configuration has existed in the instances. If the service is so newly started here, again we need to work on the configuration section and the implementation code section here. So these are the main the concepts we need to focus here whenever we are trying to implement this particular microservices here. Getting the point. So with help of this particular the functionality, we can implement like what we can call it as the secure application, the secure microservices application here, right? And here, so the size here. So what we need to understand here, we need to maintain the proper size here. Getting the point. So that we don't have the microservices the take on the too much responsibility. Again, we are going to get a problem here. So while implementing this particular microservices, we need to provide the more onto the size, and where exactly the microservice available. We need to provide the particular location, because each microservice is going to have some locations here. So that we are going to work with the REST APIs endpoints here. With help of this particular endpoint, we are going to communicate with microservices here, and scalable here. So here, whenever we are going to work with the asynchronous processing here, getting the point, and we don't want to so down our application, or we don't want to go back to the performance issues here. So this is we need to make in the mind, and we need to develop the microservices information here. Right. Now, what we need to understand here while developing this particular microservices here, so we need to follow some patterns here. Correct the point. So we need to follow some patterns here. So what are the different patterns we are going to have to implement this particular microservices here? So we'll understand the different kinds of pattern here. We'll understand the different kinds of pattern, so that we'll get to know more about this particular microservices internally here. The first one code development pattern. Code development pattern here. So what exactly the particular code development pattern will work here, and we'll try to identify the remaining pattern here. So routing pattern, and the third one here, client resiliency pattern. Security pattern, and logging and tracing pattern, and final one, build and deployment. So this is very important. We need to understand the. So based on this particular different patterns here, we are going to implement the microservices here. So first we'll focus on the code development pattern. So what exactly the code development pattern will work here? Getting the point. So inside this particular code development pattern here, first we need to understand the the service, how this particular services we are going to implement. So this section we'll call it as a service granularity. So let's see how we can change here. Maybe it's going to take some time. Okay, so here I'm going to write this particular code development section of code here. Okay, now if you observe carefully, so this is all about the our code development pattern here. And here, while developing this particular code development microservices here, we need to understand the basic of building microservices here. So what are the basic of building microservices here? Right. So what exactly the right level of responsibility the service should have here? So it's nothing but here we are going to work with the service information here. Getting the point. So here we need to work on this particular service section here, and what kind of the service we are going to provide, and how this particular the service is going to responsibility. So this section of code we need to write here, and the same way, and another one we need to work with the communication protocol here. So communication protocol basically, so how your client or how your service is going to communicate with. Getting the point. How your client or service, so it's going to communicate with your microservice here. So this section of code we need to write inside the another component call that is called communication here. Communication. And after this, like what kind of the interfaces we are going to define. What kind of the interfaces we are going to define. So the interface design also is important here. So while implementing this particular microservices, so these are this functionality we need to understand first, and later we can work on the interfaces information here. So interface design here. Interface design. And finally we need to work with configuration here, because this particular microservices is going to connect with so like a version control system and databases. Like if I'm going to connect with a cloud environment, we need to provide the cloud environment related configuration. So this section of code we are going to work with configuration management here. Getting the point. So configuration management section. And finally event processing here. Getting the point. So event processing. So this particular event processing, what we will do when we're trying to communicate with the state and data change between the two services here, we need to work on the event processing. So how we are going to work on the state of the state of this particular object here. So how it is changed here. So the state of object we are going to identify with help of this particular event processing here. So now we need to follow the final concept called event processing here. We need to follow event processing here. So these are the basic component will come under the core development pattern here. Whenever we are trying to develop this particular application, whenever we are trying to develop the microservices application here, now what we need to understand. So what kind of the service we are going to develop. So we need to provide the functionality, and the service is responsibility. Getting the point. The service is going to provide the responsibility when we are going to communicate with the client or other service here, and the communication protocol here. When we are trying to communicate with different services here, like what kind of the communication, either we are going to work with XML, or we are going to work with like what we can call it as a JSON here. So these are the communication protocol here, right? And so interface design here. So what we need to understand regarding this particular interface design. So basically we need to design what exactly your service here. What exactly your service here. So the service we are going to work with the interface design here. And what kind of the URL we are going to communicate with our service here. So this section of code we are going to design inside this particular design interface, and we identify the configuration management here. The configuration management of your microservices is like we need to manage the configuration of our microservice here, so that it will try to move between the different environments here. Getting the point? So it's going to move the different environment in the cloud. Getting the point? So that we can minimize the application code here. Based on our configuration, it will try to move on to the different environments. So those section of code we are going to define inside this particular configuration here. And the final one, so event processing here, what we need to understand here, basically we need to decouple our microservices. So using this particular events here, so that we can easily integrate with different services here. We can easily integrate with our different services here, right? So these are the basic information about the code development pattern here. Now we need to understand the particular routing pattern. So you need to understand very carefully here. Basically, based on this particular patterns only, the entire microservices is going to work. The microservices is going to work. So we need to focus more onto this particular patterns here, right? Now routing pattern. Getting the point. So how exactly this particular routing pattern is going to work? Basically, this particular routing pattern is going to deal with how a client application that want to consume a microservice here. Getting the point. The client application, how we want to consume this particular microservices, we are going to discover the location of the service. Getting the point. Where this particular service is located, we are going to discover the location, so that the client application is going to consume our microservices here, whatever the microservices we are going to develop here, right? And in the cloud based application here, now what happens here, basically we are going to have hundreds of microservices here. Hundreds of microservices instance are running here. Now how we can identify here? So what exactly our microservices here? But in this case, now what we need to understand here, so you need to define the physical IP address of this particular service, and we need to provide the single entry point of our service here. So that now what happens here internally, we are going to allow the one client at a time here with help of this particular physical IP address here. So that this section of code we are going to work with the routing pattern here. This section of code we are going to work with the routing pattern here, right? So how exactly the routing pattern is going to work? Internally, we are going to work with one more the important concept to call service discovery. Getting the point. Now I'm talking about the, sorry. Now I'm talking about this particular, so routing pattern. So inside this particular routing pattern, what is the main, the important component we need to understand here? Something called service discovery. Getting the point. Basically, what it will do this particular service discovery, and we are going to make our microservice discoverable. The client application can find them, so without having the location of the service. Getting the point. So instead of providing the location about the service, now what we are doing here, the microservices is going to communicate through this particular service discovery. The service discovery is going to take care of where this particular service is located. So what exactly the service is having IP address here. Getting the point. So instead of providing the service information in our configuration file, now what we can do, so we are going to communicate with the service discovery. The service discovery is going to communicate the service and client application to provide the appropriate service here. Getting the point. So instead of hard coded into our application, now what we are doing here, we are going to communicate with our service discovery. So we'll work on the more about this particular service discovery. So how exactly is going to work here. Okay. Now what you are understanding here, with the help of this particular service discovery, we can communicate multiple microservices here. We can communicate multiple microservices here. And another one, we need to work on this service routing here. Getting the point. So one more component we are going to have here, service routing here. So what exactly the particular service routing is going to work? And here we are going to provide the single entry point of all your services here. Getting the point. We are going to provide the single entry point here. So that now what happened here, we can achieve the security policies and routing rules here. So we cannot give more we cannot allow the more client at a time here. So with the help of this particular service routing here, now what we will do, based on this particular service routing, so we can communicate, like we can allow the how many entry point we want to allow our service here. Getting the point. How many entry point we want to allow the particular microservices with the help of this particular service routing here, we are going to work here. Right? So these are the two important sections we need to focus when we are trying to work with the pattern called a routing pattern. So this section of code we identify code development, and now we are working with the routing pattern. So finally we need to work with the client resiliency pattern. So what exactly the client resiliency pattern is going to work? So basically here the microservice architecture is highly distributed here. Getting the point. So here when we are trying to develop in microservice applications here, so those are the highly distributed applications here. So now what we need to write here, we need to very extremely work on the particular problems, because if it is a highly distributed here, we are going to get different kinds of problems here. We need to prevent those kind of problems here. So how we are going to prevent here? The first one here, so client side load balancing here. Getting the point. So with the help of this particular client side load balancing here. Now I want to write here what happened. So client side load balancing here, right? And another one, so circuit breaker pattern. So we'll talk about the circuit breaker pattern, how exactly which is going to work. And we are going to have fallback pattern, and another one we are going to have bulkhead pattern. So we'll try to identify the different patterns here. First we need to identify the client side load balancing, and so we need to work with the circuit breaker. So this is the circuit breaker pattern here, and so we need to work on one more component here, something called so fallback pattern. fallback pattern. And here we need to work with so bulkhead pattern. Getting the point. So these are the very important section we need to understand here. So these are the very important section we need to understand here. So what exactly the client side load balancing is? Getting the point. So how we can identify? Basically, when we are trying to work with the client's resiliency pattern here, so as I explained here, because the microservices architecture is highly distributed here, we are going to work on the multiple microservices here. Right. In this case, we may get to, we need a load balancing here. So how we are going to work with the load balancing here? With help of this particular client side load balancing here, we are going to we are going to provide the load balancing on our particular services here, so that the client can call multiple instance of a microservices here. The client can call multiple instance of this particular microservices, and all the microservices are load balancers, and with a like what we can call it as a, and all the microservices are, so what we can call it as a, it's having the good health here, because based on the load balancing here, we are going to handle the all the microservices, and we are going to so provide the appropriate request to the particular service here, right? So this we are going to achieve with help of this particular load balancing. And what about this particular circuit breaker pattern? Basically, the circuit breaker pattern, what it will do, when like we are going to prevent the continuation call from the client application. Getting the point. If I'm going to get multiple calls from the client application here, so to prevent this particular the continuation call here, we are going to work with this particular circuit breaker pattern. Because basically, if the client is calling multiple times call, so definitely our application we are going to get the like performance, we are going to get a problem here. So instead of doing this, now what we can do, we can implement this particular client's circuit breaker pattern. So internally, which is going to take some calculation. Based on the calculation, the request is going to receive to our service here. Getting the point. So instead of giving the every time the request here, so based on this particular, so we'll understand this particular circuit breaker pattern, what exactly internally it is working. And we need to work on the another important here. So fallback here. So what it will do, this particular fallback pattern here. And here, when a service is failed here, when the request is received from the client application to our service here, if the service is provided, like the service is not responding here, now what happened here? The service call is failed here. Getting the point. So instead of returning the particular failure related information, now what we can do, we'll work on the we'll try to work on the carry over here. Getting the point. So carry over alternate means like the microservice is being called here. If the service call is failed, with help of this particular fallback pattern, we'll try to call multiple times here. So otherwise, what we will do, one service is failed, we can transfer the same request to the another microservices here. So with help of this particular fallback pattern here, we are going to achieve this functionality. One service is failed to respond here, we'll communicate with another service here. So this section of code we are going to define inside this particular fallback pattern here. Right. Now the final one. So the final one, now what we will do, basically here, bulkhead pattern. Basically, the bulkhead pattern here, it will try to use a multiple distributed resource here. Getting the point. So it will try to use multiple distributed resource to carry over the particular work here. Now what we need to understand here, so we need to handle the multiple distributed the client request here. Getting the point. So we need to handle so that we don't want to get the misbehavior of this particular service here. So one service call, it does not navigate to the another service here. Basically here, what happened here, if the client is performing multiple requests here, so what exactly the service we want to call? So we need to call the appropriate service. So instead of calling the particular service, if I'm going to call the different service here, so we are not going to get the expected result here. So this kind of the problem is going to handle by the bulkhead pattern here. Getting the point? In the bulkhead pattern, now what we will do, we are going to differentiate the, so which request it needs to communicate with which microservices here. Which request is needs to communicate with microservices here. So this section of code is handled by the bulkhead pattern here. Getting the point? So this is very important, we need to understand here. So is nothing but, so we are going to segregate the different service calls on the different service call which is coming from the client application, so that we are going to get to misbehavior of this particular service here. Getting the point? Misbehavior of this particular each service here. So the appropriate service is going to called here. So this section code is handled by the which pattern here? The pattern called bulkhead pattern. So we'll try to handle all the example what we are discussing here. So first we'll communicate with this section of code here. Getting the point? So once this particular code development pattern is completed, we'll work on the service discovery and service routing, and finally we'll move on to this particular client resiliency pattern here. Client's resiliency pattern. So once we are familiar with the client's resiliency pattern, now what we will do, we'll go for the security pattern here. So how exactly the security pattern is going to work? So basically, to work on this particular security pattern, now what happens internally? We already identify the basic security here. The basic security here, we are going to work with authentication and authorization here. So this information we already identified in a previous example. But here, so with the help of this particular credential management and propagation, so we are going to have one more component here, the credential management and propagation. So this particular component we are going to implement with the help of this particular token based here. Getting the point? With the help of this particular token based here. So we'll see how we can implement the token based here. So based on this particular token authentication server, we'll try to communicate with each and every microservices. If the token is not activated, now what we can do, whatever the request we are going to get, the request is not going to receive to our application here. Between the each and every microservices here, if you observe carefully, here one microservices we are having, and here we are having one more microservices. So these two microservices are going to communicate with token authentication server. Getting the point? So it's going to communicate with our token authentication server. What it will do, so this particular token authentication server, it will try to provide the token information. If the token is successfully activated or successfully verified here, whatever the request we are going to get here, the request is received to the appropriate microservices here. So first we'll work with authentication and authorization, and once it is completed, we'll move on to the credential management and propagation here. Getting the point? So this is all about the security pattern here, and we'll move on to the logging and tracing pattern. So basically, the logging and tracing pattern here. Now what we need to understand here, because here each and every service we need a logging information. Logging is nothing but the log information about the microservices here. Getting the point? Now what we can do here, in our this particular microservice architecture here, so it is very difficult to debug and to trace the particular application services here. If I'm going to work with one log file here, so we cannot identify this log file belongs to which service here. So to understand this particular problem here, in the microservices here, we are going to work with a log correlation here. We are going to work with a correlation here. Based on the correlation ID, we can easily understand between so which service here. Basically, the log information we are going to work on the single user transaction here. For each transaction here, we are going to have a one correlation ID. So based on this particular correlation ID, we'll try to identify what are the log messages we are having for the particular microservices here, right? And one more we need to understand here, the microservices tracing here. Basically, now what we can understand here, the client to transaction across all the services involved, getting the point. So we'll explore the how to visualize the flow of the client transaction across all the services here. Getting the point. So whenever I receive the one transaction from the client application and how the transaction is involved into all the services here. So with the help of this particular tracing here, we can easily understand here. We can easily understand here. So this logging and tracing here, we are going to implement here. So once we familiar with service discovery and client side load balancing here, client side load balancing here, and finally how we can build and deploy this particular part here. Basically, because basically, so with the help of this particular cloud environment here, now what we will do, we'll try to build and deployment the particular pipeline. So we'll see how we can deploy this particular application here, how we can deploy this particular application into the cloud environments. So we'll identify we are having different kinds of cloud environments here. We'll try to identify the different environments here. Okay. So these are the basic and important pattern we are going to follow here to work on this particular microservices here. To work on this particular microservices here. And to use this particular microservices here, now what we need to understand here, here we are going to work with so some Eruca servers and Git related information. And so as we discuss here, the service discover, again we are going to communicate with Eruca service discovery here. We'll try to, so I will provide whenever we are trying to discuss with each pattern here, the particular service we are going to provide here. The particular service we are going to provide here. So this is all about the simple example, like simple introduction about the microservices here. So any questions here? Basically, the whatever the pattern is suggested, the Saga design pattern here. Now what we need to understand here, here we need to identify the data consistency here. Whenever we are trying to work with multiple microservices here in a distributed transaction scenario, what it will do, it will try to provide the data consistency here. So how we identified here in the bulkhead pattern, what it will do, when we are trying to work with multiple transactions here with the help of the multiple services here, so it will try to provide the appropriate information to the each and every service. Same way, this particular Saga design pattern is also it going to manage the data consistency across all the microservices here. Carrying the point. So we'll talk about this particular the Saga design pattern in our microservices here. So how exactly which is going to work here. Okay. So any questions regarding this particular microservices introduction here?
Hello.
Yes.
So these I have some little doubt like code development pattern. Like
Yeah, tell me.
what? Yeah, when we design the microservice, we need to keep in the mind like service communication, interface design, configuration management. These things will have to be keep in mind during the development of microservices.
Yes.
Okay, in the routing concept, like just I heard about Eureka, some cloud for routing. So is that services we can implement a routing pattern or something
Yes.
different?
Same. The Eruca only we are going to implement here.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So any other questions here? Like basically what I want to
I
provide
have
here.
one question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So in code development pattern, there
Okay.
is one communication and also configuration management. Actually, in configuration management, it's something like it will connect to the databases.
Yes.
And what about
So,
the communication management? Communication is something like
so communication is
between.
nothing but here we are having how we are going to communicate the two microservices with the help of the JSON format or XML format. So this communication we are going to design.
Oh, okay, but okay, fine. So what I was thinking, like,
It's like a REST
when you
APIs.
want
Just you
to.
can think a REST APIs. Whenever if I'm going to send a request here, how we identified in the last example with help of Postman, how we are getting the response. But the response again we need to convert it into the request request for the another microservices here. So basically, like how it will work here.
Mhm.
Uh, Now you can see like here I'm having one microservices here, and here I'm having one microservices here. So these two microservices are how we are going to communicate here. I'm sending one request to this particular microservices because so one service is implemented here. Okay,
Okay.
and this service is perform the operation and sending the response here. And this response is need to take as a request, and again based on the response of this particular microservices we are going to perform the some other operation. So for example here it is a what we can call it as a if it is a e-commerce application. In the e-commerce application, now what we will do, order related microservices we implemented, right?
Mm.
And this is the payment related microservices. Now what we will do, from the order we connected with the payment here. Okay, the
Okay.
payment we completed here. So based on the response here, we are going to perform the some other operation. If I want to so deliver this particular item or not, how we are going to identify based on this particular response. So these two microservices are going to communicate over the so XML or so JSON format. So this we need to identify here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what I read was like they are going to communicate through form.xml or something by giving their versions of each um, microservice dependency. So that's what my
No, no, no,
difference.
no.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
So if I'm going to provide the again the dependencies here, we are working within the monolithic monolithic applications only. Because if you see in the monolithic application, what we will do, so we'll divide the different modules here, and each module we are going to have one var file. But when we are having the main project here, all the dependencies we are going to include into the pom.xml file. But here, each application will have a different. We are not going to communicate with the particular pom.xml. All our applications, like all of the microservices, are going to communicate with service discoveries and service routing. In the service discovery and routing, we are going to provide the name of the each microservices here. So we'll see how the each microservices is communicating, because we are going to have some UI design regarding this particular service discoveries related Eruca related service we are going to use, and we'll identify how the each microservice is going to identify here.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so basically the circuit breaker here, what we will do, so it's going to have some calculations here. So based on the calculation, it will keep on communicating with our application here. So for example, the application is connected in the 1 minute. Now it will wait 1 more minute. So it will connect it to the second minute. And if the second minute also we are not getting any response here, it will wait 2 more minutes. So again it will connect in the 4 minutes. The 4 minutes also we are not going to get any response here. It will connect in the 8 minutes. So like 60 minutes, so some 32 minutes. Getting the point. So this keep on increasing the waiting time, and we'll try to connect it to the our application here. So this is implemented in our circuit breaker pattern here. Basically, these are the design patterns basically. So based on the design patterns here, so in the microservices are implemented. So we'll find out the how exactly the each pattern is going to work internally. Okay. And here, so as I suggested here, microservices are is loose coupled here, because here we are not going to depending on the each microservices here. Okay. So with help of this particular loose coupling here, now what we will do, we'll try to implement the one microservices here. So we'll try to work on the implementation of the microservices here. We'll continue in the tomorrow class. So how we can implement the simple microservices. To implement the microservices, so what we need to understand first. Getting the point. So first we'll work on the code development pattern related microservices here. Based on this particular microservices here, we'll try to implement the all the example here. Okay. So we'll continue tomorrow recording our the first microservices example.
Hello.
Yes, tell me.
Sir, actually, this is more about the REST API application, which you have shown on the last class. I have tried implementing this REST API CRUD operation actually, and while hitting, actually, application is running fine. It says that Tomcat has started and it's running on 8080 port. But when you are running hitting this in the Postman, it says some error response, like 404 kind of things in the post method. I'm trying to create some ID, and the thing was showing right previously localhost 8080/test, right, some white space, some error was coming, right. So the same error is coming. So how to resolve that? Actually, I have tried changing the port also. Like I have mentioned server the port in the application property. So instead of 8080, I have used 8090. So it's not like coming up. Like so, how to resolve that? Can you just guide me on this?
Okay. So just provide the screenshot, like what exactly the error you're getting. So I will
Sure,
look into and I provide the information.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So any other questions here?
Yes, I have little one more doubt. Whatever the design patterns you have discussed set up now, so these will come up in the along with like a Saga design patterns, or is it different from these micro design patterns?
So basically, these with help of the already these design patterns are implemented. So with help of the existing design patterns only, so they implemented some code.
When I'm asking is the combination of all this microservice design pattern what you discussed as of now, this is known as a Saga design pattern, or something different than what you discussed as just now design patterns.
So Saga is also it's related to same here. Bulkhead pattern.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So we'll continue tomorrow.
Thanks.